Summer of 1974. You are standing in your grandmother's kitchen and she is pouring something dark and bitter-smelling into a teaspoon. You do not ask what it is. You just open your mouth, swallow, and hope it does not come back up. That was medicine in the 1970s. Not the kind that came in a child-proof bottle with a warning label, the kind that came from a recipe card, a neighbor's advice, or a jar that had been sitting under the sink since the Eisenhower administration. And here's the thing. Some of those remedies actually worked. But today, you could face a fine, a felony charge, or a visit from a federal agency for using them. So hit subscribe, because here are 25 home remedies from the 1970s that are completely illegal now. Number 25. Camphorated oil chest rubs. Every winter, the moment you started coughing, out came the camphorated oil. Your mother would warm it between her palms and rub it across your chest in slow circles until the fumes made your eyes water and your sinuses opened like someone had thrown a window wide. The stuff was potent. Pure camphorated oil could contain up to 20% camphor, and parents would slather it on babies, toddlers, anyone who had a wheeze. Nobody read a label. Nobody measured. You just poured it into your palm and rubbed until the smell filled the bedroom. In 1983, the FDA enacted 21 CFR 700.11, making it a federal crime to manufacture, distribute, or sell any product containing more than 11% camphor. The regulation carries the full weight of federal law. Violators face product seizure, injunctions, and criminal prosecution. Children had been having seizures and liver failure from absorbing too much through the skin. The concentrated camphorated oil that sat in every medicine cabinet in America did not just disappear from store shelves. Making it became illegal. Number 24. Paregoric rubbed on a baby's gums. If a baby was teething and screaming at 2 in the morning, there was one remedy that every parent in the neighborhood knew about. Paregoric. It was a tincture of opium flavored with anise and camphor, and you could buy it over the counter at any drugstore in America without a prescription. You would dip your finger in the bottle, rub a drop directly onto the baby's gums, and the crying stopped almost instantly. The relief was so dramatic that parents kept the bottle within arm's reach of the crib. By the mid-1970s, the DEA reclassified Paregoric as a Schedule III controlled substance. You now need a prescription to get it, and no pediatrician alive would write one for a teething infant. The bottle that once sat on every nightstand in America is now locked behind a pharmacy counter. Number 23. DDT powder for head lice. When a child came home from school with lice in the 1960s and early 1970s, some families reached for the same chemical the government had been spraying on crops and marshes for years. DDT. You would dust the child's hair with it, wrap a towel around their head, and wait. It killed the lice dead. It also accumulated in human tissue and stayed there for years, building up in fat cells with every exposure. After Rachel Carson's Silent Spring exposed DDT's devastating effects on wildlife and human health, the EPA banned it entirely in 1972. Anyone still sitting on a can of DDT powder in their bathroom closet in 1974 was technically in possession of a banned pesticide. The lice survived. The chemical did not. Number 22. Sassafras root bark tea. In the rural South and across Appalachia, the first warm days of spring meant one thing: time to dig sassafras roots. You would peel the bark, boil it into a reddish tea that tasted like homemade root beer, and the whole family would drink it as a spring tonic to thin the blood after a heavy winter diet. Grandmothers swore it cured everything from sluggishness to skin rashes. The kitchen smelled like candy for an entire afternoon. Then the FDA discovered that safrole, the compound that gives sassafras its distinctive flavor, caused liver cancer in laboratory animals. The FDA banned safrole as a food additive, and by the 1970s, selling sassafras bark tea for consumption became a federal violation. The roots are still in the ground. You just cannot legally brew them into something you sell or serve anymore. Number 21. Chloroform liniment for sore muscles. Your grandfather kept a brown bottle of chloroform liniment in the bathroom cabinet right next to the aftershave. When his back seized up after a day of yard work, he would pour some onto a rag and rub it into his lower spine until the skin went numb and warm. Chloroform was a standard ingredient in dozens of over-the-counter liniments and rub-on pain relievers throughout the mid-20th century. Nobody thought twice about it. In 1976, the FDA issued a final rule under 21 CFR 310.502 that banned chloroform from every drug and cosmetic product sold in the United States, classifying it as a probable human carcinogen. The regulation did not stop at pulling products from shelves. It made it a federal violation to manufacture, compound, or distribute any consumer product containing chloroform for human use. That brown bottle your grandfather reached for without a second thought is now in the same regulatory category as a banned industrial chemical. Anyone caught producing a chloroform liniment today faces federal prosecution. Number 20. Sweet spirits of niter for fevers. When someone in the house was running a temperature, your grandmother might reach for a small bottle labeled Sweet Spirits of Niter. It was ethyl nitrite dissolved in alcohol, and the routine was simple. Mix a few drops into a glass of water or juice and drink it down. It made you sweat profusely, which people believed broke the fever. Families passed the recipe down like a kitchen secret. The problem was that ethyl nitrite is a volatile compound that can cause a sudden and dangerous drop in blood pressure, especially in children and the elderly. The FDA removed it from the approved list of over-the-counter drugs, and today it is not legally available for home use anywhere in the country. Number 19. Pennyroyal tea for menstrual cramps. This one carries a long and deeply troubling history. Pennyroyal is a member of the mint family, a low-growing herb with tiny purple flowers and a clean, sharp scent almost like spearmint. For centuries, women brewed it into a strong tea to bring on a late period or to ease severe menstrual cramping. By the 1970s, Pennyroyal was still sold openly as a dried herb in health food stores, co-ops, and natural remedy shops across the country. You could buy bags of it alongside chamomile and peppermint without anyone raising an eyebrow. Women who could not afford a doctor's visit or who lived in rural areas without easy access to gynecological care turned to Pennyroyal the way their mothers and grandmothers had. It was tradition, it was accessible, and it was lethally dangerous. Pennyroyal contains pulegone, a compound that is devastatingly toxic to the liver. Even a small amount of concentrated pennyroyal oil can trigger irreversible organ failure within hours. There were deaths throughout the 1970s and 1980s, most of them young women who drank a brew that was too strong or who swallowed the concentrated essential oil directly. They ended up in emergency rooms with liver damage so catastrophic that transplant was the only option, and some did not survive long enough to receive one. The FDA issued warnings, then stronger warnings. Today, pennyroyal oil is effectively banned from sale as an ingestible product in the United States, and the concentrated oil carries poison warnings in every country that still permits it on shelves. The mint that grew wild along your grandmother's garden fence, the one she would snip and steep on the stove without a second thought, turned out to be one of the most dangerous plants you could put into a teacup. You can still find pennyroyal growing along roadsides in nearly every state. You just cannot legally sell it as something to drink. Number 18. Calomel as a purgative. Before the 20th century and well into the mid-1900s in rural communities across the South and Midwest, calomel was the remedy families reached for when someone felt sluggish, bloated, or constipated. Calomel is mercurous chloride, a white powder that looks harmless enough. You were swallowing mercury. Parents gave it to children after heavy holiday meals. Adults took it whenever their digestion felt off. You would mix the powder into a glass of water or stir it into jam, and within hours the purge would begin. It worked as a laxative because it was literally poisoning your intestinal lining into violent evacuation. Chronic use caused mercury to accumulate silently in the body, and the symptoms built up over years: tremors in the hands, bleeding gums, kidney damage, and teeth loosening and falling out one by one. The FDA eventually banned calomel from all internal medicines. If you find a tin of it in an old family medicine chest today, You are holding a substance classified as hazardous waste. Number 17. Azarcon and Greta for upset stomachs. In Mexican-American communities across Texas, California, and the Southwest, two bright orange and yellow powders were trusted home remedies for stomach aches, especially in children. Azarcon and Greta. Mothers and grandmothers kept them in the kitchen cabinet alongside the cumin and chili powder. They were lead-based compounds, sometimes containing as much as 90% lead by weight. You would mix a pinch into warm tea or milk and give it to a child with a bellyache. The child felt better. The lead built up silently over weeks and months, damaging the brain, the kidneys, the bones. The CDC and the FDA have repeatedly issued bans and warnings. Possession of these substances for use as a remedy is now a public health violation in every state where they were once common. Number 16. Laetrile from apricot pits. In the 1970s, a grassroots movement swept across America claiming that a substance extracted from the pits of ordinary apricots could prevent and even cure cancer. They called it Laetrile, or vitamin B17, though it was never actually recognized as a vitamin by any scientific body. The belief spread through pamphlets, health food conventions, and word of mouth. People cracked open apricot pits at their kitchen tables with pliers and nutcrackers, ground the bitter almond-scented kernels into powder, and ate them every single day with the deep conviction that they were building an invisible shield against tumors. The active compound is amygdalin, which the human body metabolizes into hydrogen cyanide. The FDA banned Laetrile from interstate commerce in 1977, and multiple court battles followed as believers fought for the right to poison themselves legally. People were smuggling it across the Mexican border in suitcases and mailing it in unmarked packages. Today, manufacturing, selling, or distributing Laetrile as a cancer treatment is a federal crime. Number 15. Strychnine tonic drops. This sounds impossible, but it is absolutely true. Well into the 20th century, small doses of strychnine were sold in pharmacies as a tonic and general stimulant. People would add a few drops to a glass of water before meals to sharpen a dull appetite, settle a sluggish digestion, or simply feel sharper on a foggy morning. It was sold alongside vitamins and cod liver oil as though it belonged there. Strychnine is one of the most violent poisons known to science. It kills by locking every voluntary muscle in the body into simultaneous, agonizing contraction. The margin between a dose that made you feel alert and a dose that killed you was vanishingly thin. The FDA removed strychnine from all over-the-counter products decades ago, and today it is classified strictly as a restricted-use pesticide, legal only for killing burrowing rodents. The notion that your great-grandparents voluntarily measured out drops of rat poison as a morning pick-me-up is one of the most unsettling chapters in American home medicine. Number 14. Carbon tetrachloride for intestinal worms. On farms and in rural communities across the Midwest and the South, where livestock and children shared the same pastures and the same dirt, intestinal parasites were simply a fact of life. Hookworm, roundworm, pinworm. Every family dealt with them, and the home remedy that many of those families turned to was carbon tetrachloride, the exact same chemical used in commercial dry cleaning operations and fire extinguishers. You would measure out a small dose, sometimes a careful capful, sometimes a kitchen teaspoon, and swallow it with a glass of cold milk to mask the sharp chemical taste. It killed the worms dead, but it also attacked the liver and kidneys with ruthless, cumulative efficiency. One dose might not cause obvious harm, but farm families who reached for the bottle every spring and fall, dosing themselves and their children as routinely as they wormed their cattle, sometimes developed cirrhosis of the liver without ever having touched a drop of alcohol. Doctors in rural counties saw baffling cases of liver failure in otherwise healthy farmers, and could not explain them until the carbon tetrachloride connection became clear in the medical literature. The vapor was dangerous too. Breathe enough of it in a poorly ventilated room, say, while pouring it from a large container into a smaller one, and you could lose consciousness before you even realized the fumes were affecting you. The EPA eventually classified carbon tetrachloride as a probable human carcinogen, and the FDA banned its use in all consumer products, including anything marketed or used as a home remedy. The chemical still exists in tightly controlled industrial applications, but the days of measuring out a dose at the kitchen table and swallowing it down with whole milk are permanently over. If you find an old bottle in a barn loft or a basement shelf today, do not open it. It is classified as hazardous waste, and your county environmental office will send someone to dispose of it properly. Number 13. Comfrey root tea for ulcers. Comfrey was one of the most beloved healing herbs in America. People grew it in backyard gardens, dried the thick fuzzy leaves, and brewed them into a strong tea for stomach ulcers, broken bones, and aching joints. They called the plant knitbone because they believed it could knit fractured bones back together. It grew fast, it was free, and grandmothers had been using it for generations before anyone questioned it. Then researchers discovered that comfrey contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids, compounds that cause a rare and often fatal liver disease called veno-occlusive disease. In 2001, the FDA ordered all comfrey products intended for internal use pulled from the market. The plant still grows wild. You just cannot legally sell it as something to swallow. Number 12. Jimsonweed poultice for asthma. In the rural South and across Appalachia, families swore by Jimsonweed for breathing trouble. You would pick the broad, jagged leaves of the Datura stramonium plant growing wild along fence lines, crush them into a paste, and spread it across the chest of a wheezing child. Some families dried the leaves and rolled them into cigarettes for the asthmatic to smoke directly, and it actually opened the airways because the plant contains atropine and scopolamine. Doctors in the 19th century had prescribed it. By the 1970s, it was just something your grandmother knew how to do without ever calling a physician. The problem is that Jimsonweed is violently toxic. The line between a therapeutic dose and a lethal one is almost non-existent. Hallucinations, seizures, heart failure, death. Today, multiple states, including Tennessee, New Jersey, and Connecticut, have criminalized the possession and cultivation of Datura stramonium. In those jurisdictions, picking that plant off a fence line, crushing it into a poultice, and putting it on your grandchild's chest is not a folk remedy. It is a criminal act. Number 11. Creosote gargle for sore throats. Coal tar creosote had a dozen uses around the house, from preserving fence posts to waterproofing boots. But in some families, a diluted creosote solution doubled as the standard gargle for a sore throat. You would mix a few drops into warm salt water, tilt your head back, and gargle until the burning made your eyes water. The burning meant it was working, or so your father told you while you gagged over the sink. Creosote is a complex mixture of hundreds of chemicals, several of which are confirmed carcinogens. The EPA now classifies coal tar creosote as a restricted-use pesticide, and using it as a throat remedy today would be considered misuse of a controlled substance under federal law. Number 10. Laudanum in the family medicine cabinet. For most of the 19th century and well into the early 20th, laudanum was as common in American homes as aspirin is today. It was a tincture of opium dissolved in alcohol, usually about 10% opium by weight, and families kept a bottle of it in the medicine cabinet the way you might keep a bottle of cough syrup today. Toothaches, menstrual cramps, colicky babies, sleeplessness, chronic diarrhea, coughs that refused to quit. Laudanum handled all of it. You would measure out drops with a glass dropper and stir them into a small glass of water. Children received smaller doses, adjusted by age, though nobody had a precise chart. They guessed. It tasted terrible, like bitter licorice soaked in rubbing alcohol, but it worked on virtually any kind of pain because it was, in the most literal sense, liquid opium. In rural areas where the nearest doctor was a full day's travel away, laudanum was the family physician in a brown glass bottle. You reached for it the way people today reach for ibuprofen, automatically and without a second thought. The problem, of course, was dependence. Opium creates physical addiction with repeated use, and families who relied on laudanum for months or years found they could not stop without experiencing severe withdrawal. By the time the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act of 1914 brought narcotics under federal control, millions of Americans were dependent on laudanum without fully understanding why they felt so sick when the bottle ran dry. The transition away from it was slow. Some families in Appalachia and the rural South still had bottles in their medicine cabinets well into the 1950s and 1960s, inherited from a grandmother or simply never discarded, sitting behind the hydrogen peroxide and the box of Band-Aids. Today, opium tincture is a Schedule II controlled substance under federal law. Possessing it without a valid prescription is a felony in every state. That little brown bottle your great-grandmother kept on the second shelf of the bathroom cabinet is now in the same legal category as morphine. Number 9. Oil of tansy for intestinal worms. Tansy is a yellow flowering plant with flat-topped clusters of button-shaped blooms that grows wild across most of North America. For generations, rural families picked it from roadsides and field edges, brewed the leaves and flowers into a bitter tea, and gave it to children to expel intestinal worms. The ritual was simple and unquestioned. Some people skipped the tea entirely and placed a drop of concentrated tansy oil onto a sugar cube, letting it dissolve on the tongue. The active compound, thujone, is a potent neurotoxin that attacks the central nervous system. In sufficient doses, it causes violent convulsions, catastrophic organ failure, and death. There were documented fatalities from tansy oil poisoning throughout the 20th century, many of them children whose parents had no idea the dose was anywhere close to lethal. The FDA has classified thujone as an unsafe food additive, and selling tansy oil as an ingestible remedy is a violation of federal food and drug law. Number 8. Cocaine toothache drops. This was not a back alley operation. Through much of the early and mid-20th century, cocaine-based toothache drops were a perfectly legitimate pharmacy product that anyone could buy over the counter without a prescription. The bottles were small, the labels were plain, and they sat on pharmacy shelves alongside cough syrups and aspirin. You would tilt your head, apply a few drops directly to the throbbing cavity or the swollen gum, and the cocaine numbed the nerve almost instantly. The pain simply disappeared. Some families kept a bottle in the medicine cabinet long after the pharmacies quietly reformulated their products and stopped using cocaine as an ingredient. The Controlled Substances Act of 1970 placed cocaine in Schedule II, making possession without a valid prescription a criminal offense. Those little brown bottles with the faded labels that some families still had tucked away in a bathroom drawer became felony evidence overnight without anyone in the house realizing it. Number 7. Phenol solutions as home antiseptic. Carbolic acid, also called phenol, was the original modern antiseptic. Joseph Lister used it to revolutionize surgery in the 1860s, and by the early 20th century, diluted phenol solutions had become a household staple across America. People dabbed it on cuts with cotton balls, mixed it into homemade mouthwash, and wiped down sick rooms with it when someone had the flu. The problem is that phenol is absorbed rapidly through the skin. A strong enough solution causes chemical burns on contact, and swallowing even a small amount can shut down the central nervous system. The FDA restricted phenol concentrations in consumer products, and the concentrated solutions that once sat under bathroom sinks are no longer legally available for home use. Number 6. Aconite tincture for toothaches and joint pain. In rural Appalachia and across the Midwest, monkshood grew wild along creek banks and fence rows, and people who could not afford a dentist knew exactly what to do with it. You would dig the root, soak it in grain alcohol for a few weeks, and dab the dark brown tincture directly onto an aching tooth with a piece of cotton. The pain vanished almost instantly because aconitine, the alkaloid inside the root, numbs nerve endings on contact. Some families rubbed it on swollen knees and arthritic fingers the same way. The problem was the margin between a dose that killed pain and a dose that killed you. Aconitine disrupts sodium channels in the heart, and swallowing even a small amount of a poorly measured homemade tincture could trigger fatal cardiac arrhythmia within hours. The FDA classified aconite as an unsafe substance, and Import Alert 54-10 blocks any aconite-containing product from entering the country at the border. Manufacturing, selling, or distributing aconite preparations for internal use is a federal violation, and poison control centers still log aconite exposures every year from people who dug the root themselves without understanding how little it takes. Number 5. Ether inhalation for croup. When a child woke up at 2 in the morning with croup, that harsh, barking, seal-like cough that echoed through the hallway and terrified every parent who heard it, some families had a startling remedy stored in the back of a closet or a high cabinet. Diethyl ether. You would soak a clean cloth in it, the sharp chemical smell filling the room instantly, and hold it near the child's face so they could breathe in the vapor. It relaxed the airway muscles and the violent coughing stopped within minutes. The child would drift into a calm, shallow sleep, breathing normally again. Ether is, of course, a general anesthetic, the same compound surgeons once used to render patients completely unconscious during operations. One miscalculation, too much liquid on the cloth or holding it too close for too long, and the child could stop breathing entirely. Today, diethyl ether is a DEA-listed chemical, and possessing it without proper institutional authorization can result in federal criminal charges. Number 4. Fowler's solution for chronic skin conditions. If you had psoriasis or eczema in the 1960s or 1970s, your doctor might have handed you a small brown bottle of Fowler's solution and told you to take 10 drops after dinner. It sounded harmless enough. What the label did not spell out was that those 10 drops contained potassium arsenite, a diluted form of arsenic. Doctors had been prescribing it since the 1780s for everything from asthma to malaria to stubborn skin rashes, and by the mid-20th century, it was still sitting on pharmacy shelves next to the aspirin. You would squeeze the glass dropper, count the drops into a teaspoon of water, and swallow it without a second thought because your doctor told you to. Then researchers started connecting the dots between long-term arsenic exposure and bladder cancer, liver damage, and a specific pattern of skin lesions that showed up years after treatment. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified inorganic arsenic as a Group 1 carcinogen. The FDA pulled arsenic-based medicines from the approved drug list entirely. Today, possessing or selling arsenic compounds for medicinal use is a federal violation, and Fowler's solution is listed alongside the poisons it always was. Number 3. Quinine tablets self-dosed for leg cramps. Night leg cramps were one of those ailments that everyone over 50 had and nobody wanted to see a doctor about. The home remedy was simple. Buy a bottle of quinine sulfate tablets at the drugstore, take one before bed, and the cramps would ease. Millions of Americans did exactly that, nightly, for decades. Quinine worked. But the doses people were taking for leg cramps could trigger a potentially fatal cardiac arrhythmia, especially in older adults whose hearts were already vulnerable. In 2006, the FDA banned all unapproved quinine products marketed for leg cramps. Today, you need a prescription for quinine, and doctors will only write one for malaria. The leg cramps are still there. The easy fix is gone. Number 2. Mercury from broken thermometers rubbed on skin. This goes well beyond just owning a mercury thermometer. In some communities, particularly in parts of the Caribbean, Central America, and the urban Northeast, liquid mercury from broken thermometers was deliberately rubbed on the skin as a folk remedy for rashes, infections, and even spiritual protection. Children played with the silver beads on the kitchen table, rolling them back and forth with their fingers, fascinated by the way they split apart and rejoined. Mercury is a potent neurotoxin. It absorbs directly through the skin and accumulates in the body permanently, damaging the brain, kidneys, and nervous system. Today, the intentional release of mercury inside a home is a violation of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, the federal law that governs hazardous waste. Multiple states have gone further. Louisiana, Connecticut, and Illinois, among others, have banned the sale and distribution of elemental mercury outright. In New York City, possessing mercury without a permit is a criminal offense under the City Health Code. What was once a shiny curiosity rolling across your palm is now classified as hazardous waste, and deliberately rubbing it on your body is treated as a criminal act under federal and state environmental law. Number 1. Opium poppy tea brewed at home. In the 1970s, ornamental opium poppies grew in backyard gardens across the country. They were gorgeous. Scarlet, deep purple, bone white, swaying in the summer breeze along fence lines and flower beds. And some people knew exactly what those flowers were. After the petals dropped, you would harvest the green seed pods, score them carefully with a razor blade, and collect the dried brownish latex that oozed from the cuts. Steep that in hot water, and what you had was a crude opium tea that relieved pain, induced deep sleep, and created physical dependency with terrifying speed. Growing poppies for ornamental purposes remains technically legal to this day, but the moment you score a pod or brew the plant material into tea, you are manufacturing a Schedule II narcotic under federal law. That carries the same penalties as producing heroin. The flowers are still in garden catalogs. The line between a legal garden and a federal crime is the width of a razor cut on a seed pod. Those were 25 home remedies that every family once trusted and that the law now says you cannot touch. If any of these took you straight back to your own childhood medicine cabinet, drop a comment and tell us which one your family swore by. Share this with someone who remembers when the cure came from the kitchen, not the pharmacy. And if you have not already, please subscribe to the channel so we can keep uncovering these forgotten chapters of everyday American life.